Shalom from Israel, I'm Ariel Ben Abraham. This week we're going to reflect on chapter 11 of the book of Psalms by King David. Verse 1. In the Lord I take refuge. How can you say to me, flee like a bird to your mountain? This is a very interesting reflection. David is starting this verse with a bold statement. In the Lord I take refuge. We can say this in another way. We can say, the Lord is my refuge, is my shelter. Now, what do we understand by shelter, by refuge? Usually we understand that we are in the middle of a tempest, big storm, and then we take a refuge somewhere to protect ourselves from the storm. That's one way we can understand it. It's like we go to the refuge when we need it, not when we don't. So here in Israel we have bomb shelters. We use them when there's sirens announcing bombs. Otherwise we don't go there. So this is basically the idea that we take from here. So David is talking about a specific situation in which we are in trouble. Therefore, we take refuge in God. Now, we were mentioned last week, in chapter 10, that first of all, Judaism is about ethics. It's about making goodness prevail, and transform evil into goodness, and or eradicate evil from human consciousness. That's the whole idea. So everything that is understood in the Hebrew scriptures, including the book of Psalms, obviously, is about this ethical approach. So when David is telling us that in the Lord we take refuge, we're talking about in goodness. Goodness is a refuge. When we are stressed, when we have trouble, the goodness of friendship, support, understanding, encouragement is a goodness. Therefore, we pursue that goodness. We need it, by the way, in times of stormy situations. And we're talking about when we're dealing here with negative situations, with affliction, with pain, with ordeals. So we take refuge in goodness. We need goodness. This is refuge. It's nothing temporary here. Is that we have to protect ourselves. Actually, these shelters, these refuges for protection. So let's understand goodness as the shield that protects us from evil. So if we live in goodness, we pursue goodness, we encourage goodness, we share goodness, then we're protected from evil, from anything different or opposed to goodness. Again, we have to understand God through His ways and attributes, which, as we have pointed out many times, is about goodness, love's ways and attributes. It's about God's love. So this is what we pursue, our essence and true identity from which we came from, God's love. So, in that understanding, David, with this premise, David continues in verse 1 saying, how then can you, talking about people, not a person in particular, so this is you plural, say to me, flee like a bird to your mountain. In this case, this is a metaphor that we have to elaborate. Mountains, we have said many times that mountains represent principles, values, solid principles and values, beliefs. Beliefs that we don't move easily. Mountains. So in this case, other people may tell us when we are in terms of distress, he said, so go to yourself. Go to your mountain. Flee like a bird to your mountain. It's like depend on your own principle. Be your own self for yourself. Why you have to go to God? So David is making a clear distinction. He's like, yeah, you're telling me God is my refuge. It's like my essence and true identity. Why I have to go to my ideas, my beliefs, or whatever? I mean, my principles and my beliefs are my refuge. It's God's beliefs and principles. I mean, it's not that God believes. It's like what we say is like God's ways and attributes. So there is no mountain to go to flee away to our mountain. So what is ours? But God's essence and love from which we were created. So in this sense, the refuge, the shelter is our own protection is our own essence and identity, our own goodness, our own love. So it's like, why would I have to flee somewhere else? So David asks, it's like, why you guys are telling me to flee away to my mountain like a bird? If I have God, I mean, this is my essence, this is who I am. Why should I go to ideas, beliefs, ideologies different than my own essence and identity? Verse 2. For look, the wicked bend their bows. They set the arrows against the strings to shoot from the shadows at the upright in heart. In other words, we can understand this continuing, this warning that people are telling David. It's like go to yourself. Go to yourself because evil is out there preparing its wickedness, the arrows, against people who are upright in heart, good people. So it's like, just go to yourself. It's like hide from them. In spite that David recognizes that our shelter, our protection, our home is God's home, which is again His ways and principles. That's why we understand God's home. So they continue asking, he said, when the foundations have been destroyed, what can the righteous do? Now, we can understand this in a different way. Like people are confronting, so to speak, or addressing David about the need that he should go escape flying to his mountain. Or David is making his own. It's like we can finish the addressing like flee like a bird to your mountain, close. And then we also can understand this as David making his own reflection. It's like, for look, the wicked bend their bows. They set the arrows against the strings to shoot from the shadows at the upright in heart. So David can make this own reflection himself. I mean, we can see it in both ways. This is one of the situations that we have with the Hebrew narrative. There's no commas, there is no periods, there is no question marks. So we have to understand it in the context and based on oral tradition and based on the way this writing, the ways of writing were understood in those times. So from generation to generation, that we need the oral Torah, the Talmud, to understand the way these things are written and what they mean. So, again, these are the two ways that we mentioned already. But again, the situation that we need to underline here in these verses is we are in negative situation that we have to confront, that we have to be aware of, actually. Not necessarily to confront, we have to be aware that out there there's evil, that out there are wicked people, like strengthening their bows to shoot their arrows against us, against the people who are good, the upright in heart. So it's like, again, we have to translate that not just in social context, but also in the inner context. It's like we have egos, fantasies, and illusions. We have negative traits and trends in consciousness that are picking on us. They're shooting the arrows to our free will, even to our goodness. It's like to change our identity, to change our essence from being upright, being good, straight, to be wicked, to be wrong, to be negative. So, verse 3. When the foundations are being destroyed, what can the righteous do? Again, this is an ethical reflection of David to us. It's like when our principles, this mountain that we were talking about, when our principles, our foundations, what we believe, the goodness that we believe in, are being destroyed. In other words, we change our good beliefs, our good principles for something else, for egos, fantasies, and illusions, for selfish agendas, for greed, coveting, whatever we want in the material world that can threaten, that can weaken the goodness in us. We have to become ruthless in order to get what this fantasy or illusion from ego requires from us. But sometimes it happens, we stop being good in order to be cruel, to be indifferent, to be indolent. Then again, we are sacrificing the good things in us, these foundations that David is talking about, that when the foundations are being destroyed, what the righteous can stand. I mean, how? So this is an ethical reflection that we have to pay attention. Verse 4, which is interesting because it's some kind of an answer. But again, we have to understand it in the proper context, which is the Lord is in His holy temple. The Lord is on His heavenly throne. He observes everyone on earth. His eyes examine them. So that God is in heaven and He observes everything, everybody. And He also evaluates everyone's behavior, everyone's doings. So we have to take this verse and connect it to the previous one. In other words, before there was a reflection about an ethical reflection. So where are we standing on? What are our foundations? Our foundation. And then you say, our foundation is God. That's our place. He said God is in his holy temple. It's not like David is saying David is there in his holy temple, in his throne, watching to his creation. What he's telling us is that be aware that your own essence and identity, the goodness that is us, coming from God's goodness, is reigning, is commanding, is in a throne, is leading his creation, and is watching what we do. So this is not a judge, an old man with a long beard looking at what you did this, you didn't do this. It doesn't work that way in Judaism. What he's saying is the goodness that is in our consciousness, that is the extension of God's goodness, which is enthroned in our goodness, is the ruler, is the principle, is the cause. Observes everything, meaning pays attention to everything. This is not a judgment thing. This is not like a police watching. This is our heavenly essence that created us, in us. He's telling us, hey, I see what you're doing, so be aware of what you do. If you do something wrong and you have negative fantasies and illusions, we're seeing them. I mean, the goodness is seen, is telling us the good things in us. Okay? We see, we evaluate, we see how bad, how difficult, how complicated, how negative it may be in our consciousness. So in other words, this is an ethical, our ethical self, our higher self, the moral self that we have. He's watching and it speaks to us. We know that. It's like, don't do this. In the Jewish tradition, they call it the positive inclination against the negative inclination. So we have like this good angel who is talking to us, and this little devil who is talking to us on the left side. But it's not about a war who's more powerful or more weak. This is about watching. This is about free will. This is about making choices between the positive ones and the negative ones. That's what it's about. So let's understand those tendencies, to be evil. I cannot control my desires to have a double portion of ice cream instead of one, and this kind of thing. No. This is about knowledge. We have said in the blog many times, and probably in these videos also, the commentaries that we have made on the portion of the week and in the Messianic consciousness in Jewish prophecy, that we need knowledge in order to make choices. This is not about like we have free will and we don't know what to choose, and we have the tendency to do evil and the tendency to do bad, good. It doesn't work that way. We need knowledge in order to be able to make choices, the right choices. We have to be educated. So life in this sense is an educational process. And if we take a deep look of what it is, we realize that we are in this material world, in this physical life, in this human life, to learn how to love. It's the moment we are born as babies, what we start getting is love, protection, nurturing. This is what we learn. And then this is what we have to remember and do when we grow up. So the more we have loved, the more we loved in this life. the more successful we are in our lifetime experience. It's like we came here to experience goodness, actually, not necessarily to experience negative things. Negative things are just the byproduct of our negative choices. So once we know what goodness is, what love's ways and attributes are in our life, in our consciousness, in relation to us and to others, then we know that we have to pursue goodness and love. Not just as the reason to be here to learn, but our essence and true identity. We are good. We all are. The problem is that some people choose to do evil, and they do evil at the expense of the goodness, at the expense of the goodness of their lives. Because they need goodness to survive. That's what we were saying last week in the commentary on chapter 10, that evil people are by definition vampires. They need goodness in order to feed their evil. Because evil cannot be fed by evil. It can't. So in this way we understand that when God is in His holy temples, in the sanctity of goodness, goodness is sacred, by the way. Love is sacred. We don't mess with that. It's the most important thing in life. It's the most important things in consciousness. This is in the heavenly throne. It's like it's ruling life. It's destined to rule life. Every aspect and dimension of consciousness is destined to be ruled by love, by goodness. He observes everyone on earth, His eye examines them. In other words, our judge is goodness. Goodness and love are the ones that confront us when we do something wrong. The sense of goodness, the principle of goodness, come to us and say, what are you doing? What you're doing is wrong. It's hurting you and other people. This is the observing of goodness. Goodness is not blind. Love is not blind. It's wide open eyes. It's watching. We have to be good. For the sake of goodness, for the purpose of goodness. This is the way we understand God enthroned in heaven, in the goodness, the transcending goodness, that's heaven. Because everything in the material world is temporary and transcending, so we have to elevate goodness to the level of heaven. It's enthroned, meaning it's destined to rule, to guide, to direct. 5, verse 5. The Lord examines the righteous. Yes. Goodness pursue goodness. So what's the point? The goodness is telling us, be good. Don't do negative things. Don't be bad. Don't be evil. So the examines, in this case, it's not examination. It's like it's making a moral, ethical evaluation in our consciousness. But the wicked, those who love violence, He hates extremely. Talking about God. We mentioned last week that this is much about black and white, good and evil. So God, meaning in the way we understand His ways and attributes as goodness, we have said many times, literally dozens, maybe hundreds of times in our blog, love does not cohabit or coexist with anything different of its ways and attributes. So God only deals with love. It doesn't deal with evil. Because the moment that it deals with evil, it becomes evil. So it's not love anymore. So it's separated. It's sacred, separated. So when he said that God hates wickedness, it's not a person, an old man again, like, I hate. I hate hatred. It's like goodness does not cohabit with anything different than goodness. That's what it means. So this is clear separation. He hates evil. Cannot coexist with it. That's what it means. 6, verse 6. On the wicked he will rain fiery coals and burning sulfur. A scorching wind will be their lot. Talking about God. God says to the wicked, I'm going to give you sulfur and fire, a rain of it. It's like the idea of fire, we have to insist on this when we talk about fire. Excuse me. Fire is something that transforms. Something from one state to the other. And of course, can destroy also. But the idea here is that when God pours these fiery coals and sulfur, we're talking about the goodness that we need in order to purify evil. That's what it means. Because everything has to be transformed, not necessarily destroyed. Although we have to destroy that what kills us, what threatens our lives. That we have to destroy. But there are things that we have to transform, for instance, envy, coveting, lust, indifference, indolence, arrogance, wrath. We can transform them with the fire of love into goodness. So this lust, this physical desire, sensual desire, can be focused as the desire to know God, to study Torah, to know the deeper meanings of God's ways and attributes. And we lost them, we want them, we desire them with our bodies even, with our emotions, feelings, passions, and instincts. It's like indifference and arrogance become cooperation, become generosity, building stones. It's like instead of evil, it's just dedication, commitment. Envy. We turn it into dedication and commitment and acceptance of goodness. And being goodness. So we don't have to covet or envy goodness. We become goodness. So this is what we have to understand. They are metaphors. So imagine these coals of fire on a person, it gets burned and destroyed completely. God is not like that, and we know that. At least the God of Judaism is not like that. So, 7 and last verse of this chapter 11 of the book of Psalms. Because the Lord is righteous, he loves justice. The upright will see his face. So there is a contrast within something that is burned, that is separated from God or transformed by God. We can see it either way. Like the destruction of evil in the front of goodness, as we have said before. The transformation of evil into goodness. And then the epilogue, the concluding statement of these reflections of David HaMelech, King David, because the Lord is righteous. It's like goodness is with goodness. That's what it means. He loves justice. So it's like love's ways and attributes that we were mentioning earlier do not cohabit with anything different than or of the ways and their attributes, the qualities. Guess what it is? And the upright, the good one, the good people, the people who are positive trains and traits in consciousness, will see his face. So this is will not see. This will is actually some mistranslation. It's not future. See their face. That's the original Hebrew. It does not will see their face. Why? They're with God. They're with goodness. So the process of seeing, being, having a manifested goodness is there. It's part of the same. Then that's how we realize that God and us in goodness we are one. Because we're an extension of God's goodness, God's love. Therefore, as soon as we exercise this essence and true identity, we're seeing His face. What is His God's face? No, with a long beard and blue eyes, no. White hair, no. I'm talking about goodness. His ways and attributes. The light of His countenance. It's His ways and attributes. Then we see them, meaning we're part of them, we know them. We have said many times that seeing and knowing are synonyms in the Jewish tradition. And hearing is related to understanding. So when we see the face of God, we know His ways and attributes. Like we know. Do we see? So, with this we finish, we complete our reflections on this chapter 11 of the book of Psalms. We wish you, as usual, an abundantly blessed week. Shabbat Shalom. And until next week.